was the first time I'd ever heard my own music, my own orchestrations played, literally jumping up and down on my toes. It was incredible. I'm Justin Hurwitz. I'm a film composer. I did the music for Whiplash, La La Land, First Man. Started taking piano lessons when I was about 6 and took piano lessons all the way through high school, and then figured out pretty quickly that I was never going to be good enough at piano, or did I have the passion to really be a musician. So I started thinking about composing music, and it was something that I loved more than I ever loved practicing the piano. And I seemed good at it, maybe better than I was at ever playing. So I just sort of started focusing on that and decided I was going to study composition. It was the sort of thing where hours would just disappear. My bedtime would come and go, and my dad would come into my room and say, "Your bedtime was 4 hours ago. What are you still doing up?" And I think that was I recognized that as a sign that this is something that I really loved. This is something that I should really consider doing. And then as I got through high school, I kept taking piano lessons, but I also kept writing my own music and thinking more seriously about it, and thinking this is something I should really think about studying when I get to college. So by the time I got to college, I kind of decided I'm done with classical piano. That's, end of the road for that. And I should really learn and study in a real way music composition and music theory and all those things. I don't consciously fall back on anything that I really learned playing classical piano growing up, although I'm sure I do. I'm sure that informed my sense of harmony and my sense of all sorts of things. But I do all the time fall back on the music theory background I had and the counterpoint background I had from college. And that's also a very traditional background. It's not quite the same as classical piano studies, but it's in college I learned, we had a very traditional music theory background program. So, we learned voice leading right from the Bach chorales. We learned counterpoint right from the Bach fugues. We learned orchestration right from romantic composers like Rimsky-Korsakov and Ravel, and many others. But my music education once I got to college was very traditional and very much from, as they call it, from the literature, from the Baroque, classical, romantic literature. So I had to actually seek out film music and other things, jazz, other things that I was interested in or wanted to learn, because that wasn't really part of the curriculum. I didn't have any jazz background either. That's another thing. People think I'm a jazz composer, I do jazz, I've done all these 3 or 4 jazz movies. I'm not at all. I have no jazz background. I didn't study it growing up. I didn't play it. It was because I met Damien Chazelle. We were roommates in college. We started making our first feature film together while we were, I think, sophomores or juniors. It was really through knowing Damien, he was a jazz drummer growing up, and he loves jazz, and he was making this movie. It's actually right behind me. You see the bottom of the poster, Guy and Madeline on a park bench. It was almost like that movie was almost like a prototype for La La Land in some ways. It was a musical. It was a love story, simple love story musical with some jazz in it and some songs. And it was through making that movie that I kind of had to listen to some jazz and look through some jazz lead sheets and whatnot, and learn how to write sort of a traditional old school type of jazz. There was a very steep learning curve. I remember going to Bratislava, which is where we had the score recorded. We sort of scrapped together enough money, begged people and scrapped together enough money for one session with the Bratislava Symphony. And it was the first time I'd ever heard my own music, my own orchestrations played by an actual orchestra. I had been taking an independent study where I was orchestrating and adapting, taking piano sketches and adapting them, building them out into orchestrations, but I never heard any of that. I was just taking my handwritten scores to the professor, and we were looking them over and talking about them, but I never had any of it played. So going to Bratislava for this one session for all the songs, all the score, we got, two takes of everything. First take was sight reading. Second take, that was it. You had to keep it. Every now and then we got a third take. It was incredible. I was, literally jumping up and down on my toes during the session, and all the engineers were laughing at me because I was having so much fun. It was the first time that I'd gotten my music played, really, and it was really a crash course because some of it turned out well, and a lot of it did not turn out as well as it could have. And it was through hearing that score being performed, and then, looking at that and saying, okay, this worked, this did not work. I had all sorts of range issues in that session, musicians who couldn't hit certain notes because I thought a horn could go up to that because the book says it can, but in practice you don't really want to do it. So there were just all these things that I was learning on the fly as we were actually recording the score. If I'm working in finale, which is what I orchestrate in, I'll be clicking all the notes in. I don't like to play stuff in the finale. I like to click and put all the notes there. So I'll usually be putting the notes there, and then I'll have one hand on a piano kind of working out intervals and voicings, looking at counterpoint, seeing how two voices are interacting with each other. I use this when I'm sketching into my DAW Logic, which is sometimes before, sometimes after I do the actual orchestration and finale. So this is when I just want to create a mock-up, basically. So sometimes before or sometimes after I orchestrate, I have to create a mock-up in Logic. So we want to hear all the samples. We want to hear the sampled oboe and the sampled violins and all that. So I'll play in parts, and that's what I use that for. I've had the Kronos for years. It's been the main one, sort of sitting here at my little work area. In my piano, I sit in my piano sandwich, and this is where I am most of the time. I also have two crosses. We've used them on set at La La Land. I was playing piano, sometimes right into the actors' ears, like while they were performing something live. Sometimes they were singing a song live, so I was playing keyboard into their ear as they sang. I've had keyboards at the dub stage before. So while they're mixing the actual movie, I'll keep a keyboard just sort of on the side so that if anything comes up, if we want to patch anything with a little extra, sampled material, if we need a timpani roll, or if we need a bassoon line that isn't coming through enough in the orchestration or was never in the orchestration, I'll add a little fake something. We really, really try not to do that, but it's happened before. I'll take my crosses around, whether it's a set or a dub stage, but the Kronos lives here. I think it's about the composition. It's about the orchestration. I think the mock-ups, the samples, the controllers, all of it, it's a tool to get to the stage where we can have it all really performed and recorded, which is incredible. It's an incredible experience, but it's many months, sometimes years until then, when you're having to create mock-ups and put mock-ups into the movies. We like to take our own mocked up music and put it into the cuts of movies. So there's a long time of creating music in a computer before you ever get to the stage where you can actually conduct it, perform it, record it. My best advice to anybody, really, doesn't even need to be a composer, but it definitely applies to composers, is always try to keep learning. I've never stopped trying to learn. I still read music books, orchestration texts. I go back and revisit some of the stuff that I studied. I read new things. I watch YouTube videos from composers and other people I admire, synth programmers, things that I don't know anything about. Producers, production is something I know very little about. The last few years I've been trying to learn more, so I've been really trying to study up on that. Mixing is something that I don't have a ton of background in, so I'm always personally trying to learn new things, whether it's some of the old skills I have or whether it's completely new things. And I think that's really, really important, is always try to keep expanding the toolbox and going deeper into the things you already know.